Yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell gave two inspirational and incredibly moving speeches on the floor of the Senate, which makes you wonder what could have been if only he'd had his wish granted to be a real boy.
Twitter and Facebook temporarily locked President Trump out of his accounts. Trump was so bored this morning, he actually read a briefing.
After yesterday's attack on the Capitol building, recently defeated Georgia Senator Kelly Loeffler changed her position and did not object to the certification of her state's electoral vote. Or another way to say this is that she dumped her stock in shares of overturning the election due to her inside knowledge of events, allegedly.
Derek Evans, a newly elected Republican state lawmaker from West Virginia, was part of the crowd that rushed the Capitol yesterday. He was the dumpy white guy trying to look tough as he took selfies. No, not that one. The other one. No, not that one. The other one.
And finally, just before 4 a.m. this morning, a joint session of Congress confirmed Joe Biden's Electoral College win over Donald Trump. Vice President Pence has gotten credit from both sides of the aisle for his handling of the very delicate situation. So Pence saved the country, but can his marriage survive him being out all night with a room full of women? Stay tuned. And for the first time ever, welcome to Biden Time. Very excited to be here. As always, Christian Bladt and my fellow mirth maker, Tamra Brown.
Hi there.
And in the center square, Scott Moore, the yes man.
Hey, guys.
You're not really in the center square. I mean, there's only four of us, but I wish there was a center square. And celebrity guest, Drexel Hurd. Drexel, thank you for being with us today.
Hello, everybody. It's always good to be back, and I'm glad I'm on the first show of Biden Time today. When I saw the name, I like laughed out loud because I was like, "That is so funny."
That is definitely what we're going for. There were some other options, but this was the funniest one. Through multiple name changes, always have to immediately give credit to our friend Storage Yard resident who is still with us. You mean biding time, to remain or stay in a place or state? Yeah, it works on multiple levels, which is the name like Biden time. Well, we had originally announced back in December that we were going to do the show yesterday, but even before yesterday, I was like, you know what, this thing's going to take all day. We're going to have to wait till Thursday. I think that that turned out to be the best timing is to be talking about it today, not yesterday. If we did this yesterday at this time, I think we would have just been like, well, this is going to go on all day and be boring. So I wanted to kind of go around and let everybody share their thoughts for what they thought. We had the whole day to digest it yesterday, and we got to sleep on it. What do you think, just in general, what you think about what you saw? I'll ask you first, Tamra.
Well, there's a lot, so I don't want to take up too much time. I actually took notes because I watched Fox News longer than I probably ever have yesterday because I wanted to see how they were responding to everything. My takeaways are that first of all, I had written a joke that morning because in the morning, the mayor of DC had requested the National Guard, but nothing had happened yet. And so I made a joke that, the demonstration was peaceful because their mothers packed a lunch for them or something like that. And, so I was not expecting to, there's always those demonstrations, and I was not expecting what unfolded. That was a shocking turn of events and a historic turn of events and an embarrassing turn of events for America. And I am very glad that the Republicans have denounced it as much as they have, and
like 44 of them.
Yeah. Well, as more than I would have expected. I'll say that.
That's fair. Hey, and to be fair, more than it was in the morning. It's half as many. So, I'm only talking about the Senate because obviously in the House it's like 130. So
I guess any more than that, I'll just touch on when we get to it.
That's fine. Just overall general thoughts, though, Drexel. I'd like to ask you.
Well, yesterday was exhausting. I think that is that's something that I said. It was also just, I don't like to use the word troubling because everybody else uses the word troubling, but that's exactly what it was. So, we saw as the newspapers splashed across their A1s, our country literally was under siege from the inside, incited by the president of the United States. Like, I don't think that you can get, I kept texting people yesterday. I said, Aaron Sorkin did not prepare us for this. This was not a West Wing episode that I remember.
Yeah, and I don't know that Toby Emmerich or Michael Bay even prepared us quite for it.
Right. And so, I think and I know we'll talk about it, but there was just, I think what made it real, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of a lot of the George Floyd photos and a lot of the Black Lives Matter photos that we saw that incited a lot of the actual protests last year, and how some of those mindsets changed, because once people see images or videos of things actually happening, people's mindsets start to go, what the hell is going on? There were a lot. The photos of people actually breaching the Senate floor, the House floor, Nancy Pelosi's office, stealing furniture, Viking hats everywhere, people scaling walls, glass being broken. Like, these are images that we won't be able to get rid of for a very long time. And that is something that we have to, that we won't be able to forget. And we probably shouldn't forget, because we need to hold those people responsible who got us to that place in the first place.
Yeah, I want to touch on a few of those things, but Scott, just overall thoughts.
Just to kind of, like Drexel had said, I had jokingly said to someone on Tuesday night when that inside slider, when the Democrats swept both Senate seats in Georgia, just like how crazy it was to be in a situation that we were down to potentially 50-50 Senate, and we were dependent on two Senate races to go to the Democrats in what had arguably been a very red state, even with Biden's narrow win. So I said to someone on Tuesday night, I'm like, God, I feel like we're living in some computer simulation and someone's scripting this, because it just doesn't seem real when they both won. And then yesterday I was like, my God, we really are living in, like, you could not have scripted this any better, in the sense, like, it just seems so surreal. We knew that the president had been talking about this for weeks, so we knew protesters were going to show up. But beyond everything that everyone has just touched on, I think the biggest surprise to me was the fact that they were able to get into the building and do what they did. I had just assumed, they were going to be outside, they were going to cause trouble, they were going to protest, but inside they're going to go through and do their normal congressional duties. So I think for me, the biggest surprise was how far they penetrated into the building and what they did. And again, just that you didn't see any change in Donald Trump, which again, I wouldn't expect, but I just was even still surprised by the end with his video. I'm like, what is going on? I feel like we're just living in some weird alternate reality that no American could ever imagine would have actually happened here in real time. And I'm just, today I'm still shaking my head and being like, why is he even there still? He should be removed. And I'm still disgraced by the Republicans that have not still stepped up to make sure he's removed. But we'll touch into that. There
was definitely a glitch in the simulation. I think you're probably right. This was not quite where they thought it was going to go. I think that there's a lot to sort of look at, and one of the things that Drexel was talking about was just the access people got and where you saw them, and also let's not discount the fact that these people not only went these places, not only took photos of themselves, they took photos of themselves without any kind of masks on, which is doubly, terrifying for right now, but also very easily identified. I've read about a few people who have been fired. There is someone who hosts a show for Glenn Beck's network, The Blaze, who posted a photo in Nancy Pelosi's office. And someone on Twitter was kind enough to point out to him that he accidentally deleted that photo of himself in Nancy Pelosi's office. So Twitter being Twitter, making sure that being held accountable for that, because he probably realized, oh, I really should not be doing this. And I don't think, look, I think that there are multiple levels of instigators. The chief instigator, unfortunately, being the commander in chief. But I think a lot of people are, you get caught up in any kind of movement. It's like, yes, it starts out that it's like a fandom of some kind. Like, oh yeah, I like to go to Comic-Con and stuff. And like, I don't feel accepted. Oh, these people like me. And so I think a lot of these people, it's just like, yeah, this is just what we do. And you get caught up in the moment. And I think that you heard accounts that people were so sure that what they were doing was right, is they expected to be able to walk right into the Capitol. Michael B points out in the chat, I think it was both sad and embarrassing. I like to know, where was the tear gas, the rubber bullets? A lot of folks are pissed that they didn't get the same treatment the Black Lives Matter protested. And I think that's a point that was made.
That Biden was making literally as the show was starting. I had the speech on, and he was pointing that out.
Yeah, in those moments, people were making it. And then, of course, when you look at the day as a whole, you just sort of have those images of, just the I don't know, the riot police, and everybody was just ready to block off everything during those protests. I do think that there's obviously a double standard that comes from the top down, and the fact that President Trump literally didn't want to do anything about it. He was enjoying watching it, and when Don Jr. and Ivanka are giving the only warnings from the Trump family, trying to calm it down a little bit, that was. I don't know, in the early afternoon, you heard from Don Jr., you heard from Ivanka, but the president basically had to be forced to film that video, which Twitter has taken down because he made sure to let everyone know that he loves them.
You.
Yeah. And that's where I wanted to steer this to is, of course, there was immediately the response from, social media, but also from right-leaning media, is that, well, these couldn't have all been Trump supporters. They were infiltrated by, leftists, by Antifa, by Black Lives Matter. And there are a lot of pictures circulating of like, look, these people were at Black Lives Matter rallies. And then when you do a second step on a Google search, it's like, yes, they were there protesting against them, because they're very recognizable people who are aware of some of these white supremacist groups. So it's like, yeah, these people are from that. And it's also not that hard to understand when you get together in the morning and the president says, why don't you guys all go march down there and raise some hell? Yeah, I'll go with you. Just kidding. I'm not really going to go with you, but with you in spirit. And then everybody marches down there. It's like, well, yeah, it's a very simple cause and effect. And that, obviously, all of Trump supporters aren't those people that broke in there, but all of those people that broke in there, of course, were Trump supporters. Drexel, what do you think as you hear sort of, the I guess Monday morning quarterbacking of like, no. This was mostly peaceful. That's part of the narrative too, is that it was mostly peaceful. It was probably more peaceful for people that didn't get into the Capitol building and break windows. But sort of, what do you think about today's narrative, and in terms of addressing how different it was for any protests that happened over the summer?
Well, I mean, I think that that first of all, the president is the ultimate Pied Piper. He's the ultimate Pan, right? To your point of leading people to something and not actually doing the work himself. That has been this entire presidency. But I think that this is not something that we haven't seen before from Republicans trying to flip the narrative to benefit them, especially on this. I was on at like 3:00 this morning, our time, on the BBC with a Republican who kept saying that, well, what about Antifa? What about Black Lives Matter? And I was like, first of all, the Black Lives Matter movement was a humanitarian thing. That was, please stop killing Black people. This was, Antifa. That's a whole separate group that's like they got their own mindset. Like, they have no ideology other than what they deem to be anti-fascist. But then on this side, as of yesterday, this was all about, we didn't get our way. This was the president of the United States in every person. It was like he had taken hold of every person's mind. Kind of like if you saw like Wonder Woman, the new Wonder Woman, where the guy's like telling you this is your dreams, and now you're going out there and doing these things. This is exactly what happened. The president was out there, stringing these people along, telling them the things that they can and cannot do. Or should be doing, and to the point that his own vice president was rushed out of the Senate chamber for his own safety. Like, so it's crazy to me. And so any Republican out there is one, delusional, if they're talking about those things, and two, as Mitt Romney said, those voters and those people out there are not going to be reached unless you actually tell them the truth. In this case, telling them that it was Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all these different things. I mean, these are legitimate Republicans out there. I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Josh Hawley went on Fox News in the middle of all this chaos and started talking about and mentioning that. So these are legitimate people out there. I say legitimate in quotations, making these arguments. And certainly not helping the cause and not telling those people the truth because they want to keep them for 2022 and certainly want to keep them for 2024. And that is a dereliction of duty.
Yeah, and that narrative has become very popular from people who obviously were using the early part of yesterday to work on their own star power. Some of the most vocal objectors. I think Matt Getz has already put that out there. Scott, in terms of the aspect of it that we're trying to focus on here. What do you think of basically all of that, Scott?
Well, I just want to add real quick that I just did see that Speaker Pelosi had her press conference and has asked for the 25th Amendment, and if not, that impeachment is on the table. So I do hope that they really do legitimately move forward with something, because this president should not be allowed to have the nuclear codes and he is not in any state to be president any longer. So that was interesting that she just had said that.
So you don't think it's enough that he got kicked off Facebook for 2 weeks until the inauguration, at least? You don't
I
think
can tell you which one he's more upset about.
Right,
well,
of course.
Facebook though, and not Twitter. I think that 12 hours without Twitter was actually great. There were some good, look, it wasn't a day for a lot of funny memes, but when you had Lindsey Graham, who let's be honest, he clearly kept his liquor cabinet locked while the Capitol was under siege, and maybe he dipped into it a little bit before he got out there, because he was it was like Showtime at the Apollo there for him, or maybe more like blue collar comedy. But he was just like, hey, what about this? And the fact that the way that he was talking about Trump, and Trump couldn't tweet about it. That was in that moment he had recently been, so it was like he can't even comment on it. But yeah, so I do want to talk about 25th Amendment as a whole, but I do want to let you finish your thought first, Scott.
Yeah, I was just kind of to Drexel's point, and just in general, it's just the fact that these Republicans still carry on. I mean, Louis Germer last night, I was watching him with the Wisconsin thing. It's like, it is just asinine that they're still doing this, even after everything that happened yesterday. And then the fact is, Donald Trump lost and helped bring down, even though the House, didn't do as well as the Democrats might have hoped, but he still brought down the House and the Senate. He did not win re-election by a huge margin. And they still feel that they have to court his rabid base, or what I call the cult followers. And to me, it is just a losing strategy in the long run. I do not understand why they're still holding out to this. I mean, they're in very Republican states, and I get they're afraid to be primaried. But it's like, it just is asinine to me at this, because they've seen how low he has gone, and they will still stand by these ridiculous things. And they will, even up till last night after the mob. And you still saw the people today that were saying, the Republicans in Congress, there's like one Republican. I mean, it's just ridiculous that says he should be removed. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. So I really hope the Republicans wake up in the sense to actually have a real conservative party again, because otherwise, as I've said to people for years, if they don't change their ways, all they have to do is look out here to California to see the future of the Republican Party across the country, and it'll become just a small little regional party. And, it was crazy to me that they were trying to overdo the Electoral College yesterday, because without the Electoral College, Republicans will never win the presidency. So it's like they're giving fire and fuel to say, get rid of the Electoral College because it's fraudulent and fraudulent electors. I'm like, well, if you want to go the popular vote route, you'll never have a Republican president again. So it just feels like they're purposely just being counteractive to what they should be doing right now, which is completely denouncing Trump, separating themselves from him, making sure he is removed and away from the power of the presidency these last 13 days. And hoping to rebuild their party and rise from the ashes with a whole new different type of candidacy. I mean, I think Josh Hawley is out forever. running for the presidency, because this will, I think, haunt him for any other moderate Republican votes and everything in the future. And same with Ted Cruz. So I don't think that that's a winning strategy at all.
Well, I was going to say this to Tamra, is that you could probably already start putting out the the PAC opposition campaign commercials for anybody running against anyone, because you just have to cut between talking about basically Ted Cruz, who it's always important to remind everyone that Ted Cruz has gone so far out of his way to support Donald Trump, who not only called his wife ugly, but insinuated that his father was involved in the JFK assassination. And someone who I would give credit to if I could before yesterday said that you would think that the Constitution was Ted Cruz's wife because of how little he defends it. He's in terms of I'm using the air quotes here, the star power for everybody that was a part of this movement. I think he's the biggest one. He's the one who would have pled a case in front of the Supreme Court. He was willing to do that. I still don't understand how he's willing to do so much for Ted Cruz. And it lends itself to the, if we want to talk about rampant internet speculation, maybe he really is the Zodiac killer, and maybe Trump has that folder and he's like, do you want this to go out? So in terms of the people associated with it, and Tamara, you actually had written a joke. We said it. You said it, that one of the people that rushed the Capitol was actually somebody who'd been elected, right?
Mm-hmm. A state senator.
Yeah, state senator. Yeah. So, just what do you think in terms of the people who are involved?
Well, I happened to catch on Fox News last night. I didn't hear what Hawley said when he was interviewed, but I did hear three Republicans, congressmen who were the ones who maintained their objections. And what's interesting is that Bishop from North Carolina, he insisted that the election fraud needs to be followed through with. This is our rights as an Americans. But he also acknowledged that Trump doesn't have the votes. Like even if all these fraud claims were discovered, that it still doesn't overturn the election, and yet he still objected. So it's sort of this doubling down for the sake of sticking to your guns rather than making sense or being right. I thought that Romney's speech, when Romney said that no amount of evidence is going to be enough to convince these people that this was a fair election, which is very true. And he also said, to his Republican colleagues, he said the best way to respect these voters that are so upset is to tell them the truth, and as a call to action for them to step up. And he got a round of applause from Democrats, congressional Democrats. But it made me think that, the night pundits kept saying that Josh Hawley, all of this was his future bid. He intends to run for president. And in weeks prior to this, I was assuming that, I had said on this show a few times that I was trying to imagine who's going to be the next wild card Republican candidate, because it would be somebody that is just as unhinged as Trump. And I said jokingly, like Charlie Kirk, who is going to be their next person. But I guess I'm wondering if Romney's going to run again rather than Josh Hawley, somebody that is more moderate, who is going to be able to.
Well, they'd be going for a different base entirely. I think that, I'm sure Romney hasn't ruled it out. I mean, it's, but he's going for moderates and he's going for the old guard. And so you're going to go for, something completely different. And it just sort of depends, I guess. Yeah, in terms of who it might be, it's hard to say. I think on the other side, I wanted to call attention to something that most people didn't see as it happened. I didn't. I heard about it after the fact. But the Democratic congressman from Pennsylvania, Connor Lamb, basically started a bench clearing brawl that had no actual fighting. But there was a lot of yelling because he said that the objectors to the electoral vote for Pennsylvania were telling lies on the floor of the House. And a congressman from West Virginia did not, I think Virginia or West Virginia, did not take it kindly and wanted to strike him from the record. And when Pelosi said, you're too late, it's like he said it already. And it's like, I think that there are probably some people, of those 130 that maybe believe it, but I think that the most of them know, like, yeah, this we're just kind of, especially somebody who was newly elected in November, they are definitely not going to go against this tide. You can't necessarily forgive those people, but you can at least understand it more than somebody else, more than Ted Cruz, for God's sake. I don't know. I mean, what that might possibly be all about, but I don't know. I did want to, and I start off with Connor Lamb because there have been people that I've been impressed by. I think the fact that Vice President Pence going into this, I think that Trump had the worst possible person to try and steal an election for him in terms of Mike Pence, because you can have all sorts of criticisms for policies he enacted as governor and his support of President Trump, if you like, but he's very much a man of faith. He looked at the Constitution. He told President Trump, he's like, yeah, I can't do that. And I think even if he wanted to, he couldn't have. There wasn't any, somebody did the comparison that his job was basically to be the guy who opens the envelopes at the Academy Awards. He didn't have any actual power. I think that the way that he did that, and when they got started yesterday, there was an open mic, and you actually heard Pence double check to make sure that his statement had gone out, because he wanted to make sure everybody knew before they got started. It was like, that he's not there for that. And I think that it's a terrible thing to have to say. It's like, well, look, the vice president handled himself very well yesterday, and I haven't been able to confirm the reports, but apparently the order to call in the National Guard came from Pence and not from Trump. I've heard that from multiple sources, and I haven't heard it disputed from any sources. So that is, and also. Bill Barr had some very strong words for the president today, and now you're like, oh yeah, this is why you resign with a month to go, and we're seeing more resignations. Who are some of the people that you Scott? I made a joke about Mitch McConnell's speech, and you and I traded a message early, after his first speech. I did find it to actually be pretty impressive, and that's not someone that when I hear speak, I usually go like, wow, that was really well done. Were there people that you were impressed by the way that they handled themselves yesterday, even if maybe their behavior should not have been admirable? But it is just because of the circumstances we were in. Was there anybody that you were thinking of that stood out?
Well, I did think overall, like I said, Mitch McConnell's speech was very statesmanlike, but then he ruined it when he had to make a few jabs at Democrats and going back to 2016 and then trying to say, oh, well, let's not be like them. And I'm thinking there is absolutely no comparison. So that's what really irritated me, was like, if you had just kept that out.
But also as if his nose is so clean from
right.
hypocrisy.
Well, yes. I mean, right. Well, I mean, taking all that out of consideration and just saying if he had just stuck to the speech and kept that having to give a jab towards the Democrats out, I would have given him a lot more credit and points. But unfortunately, he had to go make that jab and go in there. And I'm like, again, you're putting party over country and you just cannot help yourself. Otherwise, the speech was very statesmanlike and it was really good. I thought, I mean, again, I would have, he's not a Republican, obviously. President-elect Biden, I think, did a really great, powerful, strong speech yesterday. And I do think Mike Pence did a good job, because in the normal times, to me, it's such an awkward position to be in general, that you're basically tallying up the votes for yourself. And you're having to say your own name. And at the end of the night, I watched it, and, he's having to basically say his name and that he had less electoral votes and that he lost. So it's such a weird position to be in a just the normal ceremonial thing for an incumbent to be announcing his own loss like that. So I give him credit on that, and I give him credit for working in the normal confines and being professional about it at the moment, in that moment, but again, not in the big picture with him as well, because, you know, he acted like, oh, I've been so good to Trump, and he seemed like, you know, we're hearing reports he was angry. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You were a lapdog for 4 years. You know exactly what you signed yourself up for. You know that you're a corrupt, fake Christian as well. So, you know, just hearing him come back and try to act like, oh, you know, so that was the problem, is that I took a lot of the speeches with hypocrisy too, because it was the fact that they're trying to save themselves when they have been behind this president for the past 4 years and allowed this damage to the country to be occurring, and then they can just pretend like, oh no, you know, we're great and we're above that. Mitt Romney was the only one to me that has stood by from the very beginning with the character and the principles, and the only Republican to go out there and vote on the articles of impeachment and to continuously even say blatantly it was the president of the United States that caused this insurrection and this mob, not people or some people, or being vague about it. He's been the only one. So of any of the Republicans, he gets the most credit, and having stuck to his convictions and his principle and his character from the very beginning with Trump. I mean, not 2016 when we went in for, you know, Secretary of State or whatever that was at Trump Tower, but in general, he has always been a person of character and integrity in the party through this Trump era. Out of everybody else there, everyone else had some hypocrisy in some moments there, even, you know, yesterday, and I still don't think they've been strong enough in condemning what this president was responsible for yesterday, and I hope to see more of that in the coming days from them, a lot stronger.
Yeah, to what Scott said, Tamra, you know, there were reports that Pence said exactly what Scott said, is, you know, after all I did for him, you know. And there's also reports that, you know, the people roaming the halls of the Capitol building were looking for him. They were specifically looking for Pence. And that, of course, is on Trump for what he said about him. And what do you think today is like for Mike Pence? And sure, the next 2 weeks, but do you think he's come to terms with what he's done and what his role has been in all of this, Tamra?
I think he thinks, I mean, I guess this goes for every politician, but I think he thinks he's the straight and narrow, the guy that's done his job and has been the most honest, because I think he feels that even when he was supporting Trump and saying that, you know, he veiled his support in this way of saying elections need to be transparent and things like that. In a way of not claiming fraud, but also supporting what Trump was saying. So in doing those kinds of things, I think he's convinced himself that he's stayed true and honest this whole time. And I think he's considering whether he's going to have a week of being president, and what all of that, that what all might, and, you know, well, picking out his favorite ties, his seven favorite ties.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about that in a moment. If that were to happen, you know, there was this narrative, we talked about it on the show, that, you know, Trump could resign and then Pence could pardon him. But now I feel like Pence would not pardon him for anything at this point. But Drexel, there's, you know, obviously a lot of troubling imaging. We could talk about a lot of things, but there's one thing to talk about, which is, you know, how close this came to actually working. And you know, the idea, what if Kevin McCarthy had been Speaker of the House, which became a lot closer to happening than I think people thought would have been the case in October. You know, so the blueprint is in place. People understand what they need to do. You just maybe need to not surround yourself with idiots like Rudy Giuliani, who, instead of leaving a voicemail for Tommy Tuberville, leaves a message for a different senator, who immediately, I don't know who had it first, but Steve Hayes, who used to be a part of the Weekly Standard, was the first person I saw with the audio. So he left it for the wrong senator, which I'm pretty sure there's a voicemail that says, "Hi, you've reached the office of Senator not Tommy Tuberville." Please leave a message for whoever this senator is, but not for anyone else. But Drexel, the idea that this could have worked. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is the most important. Republicans spent all of this time talking about election integrity. Josh Hawley, his argument for objecting was that he wanted to use this time to be able to talk about the state of the elections and election integrity, and then ceded his time when he probably got yelled at quite a bit during the lockdown between him and Ted Cruz. I don't even think we saw Ted Cruz for the rest of the night, and so other than his votes. So yeah, I think that, but I think what it really comes down to, and I know there's a few Republicans in the chat right now, which is this: you got to decide what side you're actually on. And that is, if you're on the side of democracy and you're on the side of this nation, then the stuff that we have seen and the stuff that we know is coming should concern everybody. The courts, thankfully, provided that shield to whatever Donald Trump was going to be attempting to do. The fact that we can't rely on Kevin McCarthy, the fact that we could barely rely on Mitch McConnell. You've got Lindsey Graham, who tried to pretend on the Senate floor last night that he had this long-standing relationship with Donald Trump. He didn't even mention the primary that him and Donald Trump went to during his speech last night, which I thought was weird because he started out saying, "Oh, we've had a long history," but no mention of the fact that he thought that guy was unhinged from day one.
His tweet from 2016 about what will happen if he gets elected. Once again, Twitter is always so kind to remind you of things that you've there's everyone is an ombudsman on Twitter. Like, oh no, but you actually said this. Yeah, so it certainly made the rounds a couple of times yesterday.
Yeah, look, and I think that people like Mitt Romney said last night, people just need to be told the truth. I mean, you got this guy in the chat right now still railing on Black Lives Matter as if they are similar situations. I mean, literally, the name of the movement is the actual movement itself, that Black lives actually do matter, and everything else doesn't. Everything else is not a thing. Everything else is very separate from that. And so if you can't get past the reality of what people are asking you for, as opposed to not getting your way, then your party is going to go the way of the Whigs. The Republican Party has we thought the Republican Party was going to be gone, was going to not last the Tea Party. But this current party is not going to be able to last Trumpism if they don't denounce Trumpism.
Well, and that's the thing about all these people that are worried about getting primaried. I mean, and the point was made of all these people who got primaried by Tea Party candidates. The one that always comes to mind is Christine O'Donnell in Delaware, because she had the ad that said she's not a witch. She will always be the first one I think of when it comes to that.
Go back to simpler times.
Yeah, exactly. And so you so if you primary these people, you can primary them, but those are the people that lose to Democrats. I mean, the more fringe candidate, when the people who were who stormed the Capitol building yesterday, that's not the majority of your voters. The majority of your voters looked at that and go like, oh yeah, maybe I agreed with a few of those things, that there are people who like the president, there's people who voted for the president, there's people who maybe even feel like, yeah, he's been treated very unfairly, but they're like, yeah, but I'm not going to break down the wall of I'm not going to break down the doors of the Senate. And I think that, so there's a couple things that I do want to address. We do have some. I appreciate everybody who's in the chat, and I welcome any and all feedback from anyone, really. What I will say to Roz JD is that you keep referring to the people yesterday as patriots. So I do wonder if people who think that those people are patriots, do you also think that people who are part of movements like Black Lives Matter are patriots? Do you feel like Antifa are patriots? Because I'm going to assume, I'm going to just go ahead and answer for you. You're going to say, no, it's not. And that narrative, I stayed out of a lot of dust ups yesterday and just posted a few things, but I caught wind of a few things, and there was a lot of how this is the same thing as the last 4 years. And I'm like, this is exactly different. This is the complete opposite, because yes, for 4 years, you had people that were very focused in trying to prove something that ultimately was not proven. Of any wrongdoing in 2016, you can have people who still feel strongly about it, but those people did not storm the Capitol building. And these people yesterday aren't patriots. They're fucking terrorists is what they are.
I mean,
They're
even
domestic
the
terrorists, every single one of them. Go ahead.
Even the Republican congressman who objected called them thugs last night on Fox News. Even 3 out of the 6 senators referred to them as thugs who stormed the Capitol. And they made a distinction between their constituents who showed up in Washington D.C. in busloads and the ones who actually stormed the building. But also in the chat, I think this person's commenting that Ashley Babbitt and comparing say her name to when BLM chants say her name, Breonna Taylor, but Ashley Babbitt wouldn't have been dead if these people didn't storm the Capitol. I mean, it's if anything, it's the opposite side that would be
breaking down. I've seen the video. They were breaking down a door they weren't supposed to, and it is definitely tragic that she was shot in the neck and died. But if she had not been trespassing and she had not been destroying federal property, perhaps she would have been alive. She'd still be alive today.
And it's all, listen, I think that you've heard from our leader, our Democratic leaders, certainly the vice president, about without actually saying people's names, that there was a death in the Capitol, and that was a tragedy. And I don't think Democrats are certainly shying away from that, or any Republican leader, any leader in Congress right now, maybe the president. But the hypocrisy of Second Amendment rights folks out there saying that you want to have your Second Amendment to protect your own house, and then have it turned on you when you go into the halls of Congress. What did you think was going to happen? You thought you were just going to be able to walk into somebody else's house? So it's okay for you to walk into somebody else's house, but not into your own house. And so I think that people have to realize that you cannot do the things that you think you are going to do, because it is a federal crime. And if you are the party of law and order, like you believe that you are, then you would understand that protecting our leaders, our line of succession, and those who are represented not only in Democratic leaning areas, but certainly the Republicans. I mean, we're talking. Look, Marjorie Taylor Greene and I could not be farther from apart in ideology. But at the end of the day, she's still a United States congressman, and our job is to make sure that our representatives are safe. And that's all anybody cares about. And so when people try to breach our halls of Congress, our United States Senate, they're going to be met with the same force that Donald Trump said that North Korea was going to be met with if they tried to breach the United States. And so, like you said, Christian, these are terrorists. These are domestic. There's no other way to put that. These are domestic terrorists, and they should not be called anything else.
Look, I don't think I have a problem with a group whose movement is to, throw trash cans through windows of banks and Starbucks. Like, I don't like that either, but that's not the same as what yesterday was. It's like, breaking down the window at the Apple store and stealing everything that's inside, or setting fire to, McDonald's, all that stuff, that I don't think any of that's good. I don't think that's a helpful way to express any opinion, but it is also not the same as what these people did. And
also, a lot of Republicans keep claiming that during any violence that broke out during BLM demonstrations, that Biden remained silent and didn't denounce it. That's absolutely true. He continuously said violence is not the answer.
Yeah. And just to clarify, because Michael B, I guess there's a total of 4 people who died yesterday. That one was directly a police action. There were 3 medical emergencies, which I don't know. I assume people had heart attacks or something like that happened. I don't quite. They're not specific about what that was. But so this was a woman that people knew who she was. You know, she's
a Californian. She was from San Diego. And for us to lose a Californian, that's not something that I think that Mayor Todd Gloria is going to forget. San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria, who just elected, like one of his people is dead today, and not because of anything of other than the fact that somebody took it upon themselves to do something unlawful. And I think that is something that people have to remember.
Let's move it over to the 25th Amendment, because that was trending before Nancy Pelosi went on record. And I think some people started to see Mike Pence auditioning for a job yesterday. Just like, yeah, we could handle a couple weeks of that, is maybe what people think. But I think that a lot has to go into that, and also, I guess the House is much weaker than it was a year ago in terms of Democratic support. So if to go through an impeachment process, I think you wouldn't be done in 2 weeks. And the 25th Amendment, I guess Trump has to say, like, you know what, I am incapacitated. I shouldn't be president. And then I think if he says otherwise, then you only have 4 days. Now, that's my understanding of all of it. I think everyone else on the show and in the chat is smarter than me for what it comes down to. To me, I don't know that this is exactly why we have the 25th Amendment, but I can certainly see if, and again, Pence might be the last guy to sign off on something like this, because he's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of problems, and boy, I'm worried, but I don't think it's right for me to do this. But you also need a majority of people in the cabinet, and I guess Elaine Chao, Mrs. Mitch McConnell, has resigned, but that's effective Monday. So I guess if she wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment before she left, we could do that. Scott, since I know you were the one who brought it up first, just your thoughts about it, just as an idea, but then talk about the reality of, is this a situation where you can really invoke the 25th Amendment?
I mean, both are challenging. I would just say, to me, it's just like someone should just write up a resignation letter and do the auto pen with Donald Trump's signature and get him out, because that's the easiest. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of layers, because like you said, to do the 25th Amendment, you need to get at least half of the cabinet. And after, obviously, you would have Donald Trump probably say, no, I'm of sound mind. So it's a little bit complicated, because it's really meant for a president who's just incapacitated and is unable to, speak for himself. So it's normally for health reasons, for like a stroke or something where a president would still be alive, but just not
which he's had.
Conscious. Yeah. So, so that would be complicated, because then if it doesn't work, then you do have to take it to Congress, and again, it would be the same thing. To me, impeachment could move very quickly, because all they would do is, and I've heard they've already drawn up some of the charges already, or they're working on that, is they can go ahead and do it and then vote on it and move it over to the Senate. So it would not take weeks. The problem, again, is you still need 2/3 of the Senate to remove Donald Trump, to be able to bar him from running for the future. And that's the big key and the takeaway here, is that even with the 25th Amendment and you just have Pence as acting president, you still have Trump that could come back again and run. And so the ability of impeachment, of removing him, would mean that he is barred from federal office again. And also he's not able to pardon himself and some of these other things. And that's the other thing we haven't even touched on, is that he still has 2 weeks to pardon a lot of people and do other dangerous things. And that's why, beyond what he did yesterday, and not even talking about what he did with Georgia and calling, the Secretary of State there and trying to, again, it's basically what he was impeached for the Ukraine thing. Like, he basically has done multiple impeachable offenses just in the past few days. It's just as a way to bar him from being able to run again for future office federally, and to, not have him be able to be pardoned. But both are obviously uphill struggles. So that's why I joke. I mean, the easiest thing is someone draws up a resignation, takes the auto pen, and it's done. and I've said this, I thought he was going to resign a couple of days before because he didn't want to be at the inauguration for Joe Biden before any of this craziness. I said just back in before the election, and that he was hoping Pence would pardon him. So that's why I kept saying, like, no one should be calling Joe Biden 46 because he could be 47. But the point is, it has come to that point that we have to take serious action, and we cannot allow this president to remain in office. And again, Republicans, as Drexel said earlier, really have to have that moment to decide what is the future of their party going to look like, and are they going to continue to go after a small cult of people who are not going to necessarily be there for if Trump's not involved. So it's just, they've got to look beyond this and think of the long-term effects of the damage they're doing for themselves and the country by continuing to support this president to the bitter end. It's just a lose-lose strategy for them in the long run. So they really, really have to think hard and really think about what they need to do to make sure they remove this president well before January 20th.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what one of the things that, I'm a chess player, and obviously in politics is nothing but a big chess.
Mm-hmm.
And if Republican senators who are interested in running for office were smart, they'd probably hop onto this impeachment thing pretty quick, because it would clear the field. Donald Trump would be out of the way, and so they've got to figure. And then, look, they're going to lose those people anyway. The reality is this: they would lose those people, those voters, their handful of voters, and because all 74 million of those Trump voters or those voters from November weren't all like Trump loyalists. They were just Republicans in general. So I think that and that's a problem for Republicans. They got to figure out themselves too. But at the same time, there is an opportunity for them to retake their party back in this moment if they go ahead with something like impeachment and get Donald Trump out of the way. I mean, here in Los Angeles and certainly here in California, we will not let Kevin McCarthy here in Los Angeles, Mike Garcia here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles County Republican Party or the state party forget that they had a hand in what happened yesterday. And we are going to hammer them every day until they remember why they are the minority in California.
Garcia was one of the objectors.
He was. Yeah. So was Kevin McCarthy.
Well, McCarthy voted for both Arizona.
And the funny thing, and the crazy thing is, Mike Garcia only won by 333 votes. So for him to do something so stupid in a place that's continuing to trend Democratic was beyond idiotic to me. Knowing just how close his win was beyond stupid. So I don't know why he thought that was remotely a good idea.
Look, and I think that for Mike Garcia, redistricting happens very soon. And within the next year. So who knows what the lines are going to look like here in California. We may lose a congressional seat. We may lose an assembly seat. But the reality is going to be this: the Republicans will still be in the minority. It's just going to be a matter of if we can win back the seat that Mike Garcia barely won. If we can take back the seat that Michelle Steele, who railed against this pandemic, only to find out that yesterday she also was positive for coronavirus. Hopefully she'll, that she'll, obviously we are, thinking of her and making sure that she recovers quickly. But at the end of the day, you've got California Republicans are what they are. They are the fringe Trump group as well. And there's no denying that right now.
Yeah, they're the people who spent $10,000 to go to an event in the OC for Trump back before the election, where it was the Beach Boys without the real Beach Boys, which we talked about at the time. So right there, that's the definition of fringe. If you can spend that much money to see, well, let's be honest, any iteration of the Beach Boys, but especially one that doesn't have Brian Wilson. In the chat, Michael B says, if Pence wants to keep whatever political clout he has, he needs to do the 25th. I don't know. With 2 weeks left, I can understand the reasoning for not doing it. But what do you think, Tamra? Do you think that it's basically it's something that he has to do? That and obviously he has to get people to agree with him, and you have to get everybody to not resign, which is happening fairly quickly. Do you think that that's really the only the safest path forward for the next 2 weeks?
Well, I'm going to say I don't know, because of the fact that I don't know what Pence's political ambitions are. Like, I don't know what he wants for himself moving forward. So I agree with Drexel in that, you know, the smart chess move for any Republican would be to remove Trump so that it clears the way. That would make sense. I think if if Pence enacts the 25th, I think it would be more of that sort of political strategy rather than actual concern for the safety of America. But again, you know, it could be he just doesn't care. Like, if he feels that he's just going to go to the Senate after this, or what, I don't know if any of you have an idea of what you think Pence's path is forward, but I think it depends on that.
I mean, I think that, you know, when he accepted the role of vice president, I think he certainly expected to run for president in 2024. You know, I don't know what these last few years have done to that ambition. Does he still want to do it? And look, he would be, you know, if you did a list of 10 Republicans who you think would be likely, you know, nominees for 2024, he would be on the list for sure, you know. But I don't know. I don't. It's hard to really get a read on him. You know, maybe it's because he's the definition of vanilla in every way possible. But it's also the only ice cream his wife will let him eat. But I don't know. I mean, thank you. I don't know. I mean, do Scott or Drexel, do you think that he wants anything other than running for president one day, whether it be 2024 or 2028?
I'm not entirely sure. You know, last night what we saw was probably at a certain point an exasperated. I think I said that to somebody. I said Mike Pence looks exasperated at this point, and I'm sure that, you know, if the reports are correct from Jim Inhofe, that, you know, the Senator Inhofe for everyone, that Mike Pence was in a state of mind that some people had never seen him in before, and so I think that, you know, Mike Pence is very boring. And right now the country doesn't do well with boring.
Well, they're about to get a lot of boring.
They're certainly about to get a lot of boring. But I think that you know, where Joe Biden lacks, Kamala Harris will come in and be the unboring, right? And so that's why they're going to make and have been making a really good team, and that's why 80 million, other than Donald Trump, that's why 80 million, you know, folks got out there to vote. And so I think that that's what we're going to see. I think Mike Pence, for what it's worth, there's no there you know, a one-term vice president. What have they done in their life? Where's Walter Mondale? Where are these people? Some people don't even know. Some people forget that they were vice president.
Dan Quayle.
You know what I'm saying? Some people
fellow Hoosier, Dan Quayle.
They're like, no, I would, yeah, Spiro Agnew would have remembered being
right. And if it weren't for Rachel Maddow's Bagman, people wouldn't even know who Spiro Agnew was. So I think that Bagman's great, by the way. If anybody listens to that podcast, it's really great. But you know, I don't know if there is a path for any path for Mike Pence to do anything at this point. He can't go back to being governor of India. Like, who would want to go from being vice president to governor? Who would want to go vice president going back to the United States Senate? Like, those are, I mean, these are strange times. Stranger things have happened, but I don't know that. I think that I'm sure that Karen Pence, the second lady, is probably like, this is it.
And I also don't see him becoming a Fox News correspondent either. I don't think he wants to go the entertainment route either.
No, Newsmax pays better, probably.
Yeah, he's probably going to make a lot. He's probably going to pull a Kelly Loeffler and make a lot of money. And I think my last point on this is what we saw from Mike Pence, and the defiance that we saw from Mike Pence is the first time we've ever seen that before any of yesterday happened. Yeah. And so I think that we are seeing what the post-presidency Mike Pence was going to look like anyway, or at least the drawdown from this
the unplugged Mike Pence,
this insaneness that he has had to deal with over the last 4 years. And I think, like I said, what Jim Inhofe said was, you know, whatever Mike Pence said was, after everything I've done for him these last 4 years. You know, like, I mean, that's a big deal if that report is correct.
Yeah.
So I would
go ahead, Scott.
I would say the opposite in the sense that I believe he has always had aspirations to be president. So I would not be surprised if he at least went for the 2024 race. And I also think that he was looking at his legacy and not being totally hypocritical that every politician is doing that. He did step up and do the right thing yesterday. But I think he was also looking at the longer term, bigger picture in the post-Trump era and how he could set himself up. And I think, again, like you said, Drexel, not only that is it a step backwards to be governor of Indiana, but we know that he took the risk to be the VP candidate in 2016 because he was not going to win re-election in red Indiana. So I definitely think that he wants to be president. Now, whether or not he goes through with it in 2024 and runs in the primaries, but I definitely think that has been his inspiration forever. And I don't imagine that he's just going to let that go by the wayside if he can't, so that's, again, I think that's why he's weighing all of his options very carefully now these last few days.
So does that mean you think he is going to invoke the 25th?
No, I don't know if that means he would. I mean, at first I thought maybe he would just so he can say, I'm technically president. I've been president. I understand what being president's about, even though it was for 13 days. I was technically president. So I thought he was going to set himself up from that. But at the same time, I think he is very carefully weighing the choices he's doing now, these last final days, versus what he could do for potential run at future office, because he's still relatively young compared to a lot of these other candidates. Even Mitt Romney, if he decides to jump back in, he's basically going to be like 77, what Biden is now. I mean, 78, but 77 when he'd be back in the primary. So he's going to be around the same age. So, there is that look of like, who is that next generation? And Mike Pence is not the next generation, but he's still on the younger end in his 60s. So I do believe that he's going to try to carefully weigh his options to make sure he could still be a viable candidate in 24, regardless if he actually does it or not.
Well, this also might be the last time we see an Indianan, no disrespect to those Indianans, those Hoosiers, being on the ticket, because we got Dan Quayle, one-term vice president. And now
I would take that back.
Mike
Mayor
Pence.
Pete.
Republican. But he's saying Republicans, I think.
Yeah.
Republican on the ticket. I think that there is some precedence now, and I like I said, I think that these next few years are going to be so overwhelming. I mean, you already saw the jockeying just in these last few days about who was going to object to who. And I mean, out the gate, Josh Hawley said something, and Eddie Munster, Ted Cruz came in right after that, right? Like tried to one up him. Yeah, and then looked like a crazy person on the Senate floor. Like that's what we're going to see. And so Mike Pence is going to have to navigate through that noise. And I don't know that if he is what we've seen Mike Pence and how he campaigns, certainly in the debate with Kamala Harris, is that guy who's going to be able to break through crazy noise. There's a reason why Donald Trump broke through the crazy of the 2015 primary and the 2016 election. And going forward, either somebody has to be that loud or that dynamic in personality and sane to where they can break through a lot of all of that. And Mike Pence, I'm not entirely sure if he's up to that or if he's that guy.
Because Republicans cling to who they view as the tough guy, and I don't think they see that in him.
Yeah, but just touching on something we said before in the chat, Humble Painter points out that America needs and craves boring right now, and that I think is a lot of the credit. That sort of anything resembling normalcy is. I think a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden were like, maybe they had voted for Trump, and they're like, yeah, I just want less crazy in my life.
Well, that's what we get Merrick Garland, right?
Right, exactly.
Very boring Justice Department.
And let's hope he actually gets confirmed. Tamra, I know you had a joke that you had written about that I thought was very funny. That I just I didn't choose, but that if he doesn't get confirmed for this, then what?
Biden will be like, maybe we can. Let's give him a Grammy.
Yeah, just like give him
throw him a bone.
Enough for this poor Merrick Garland. I think that the next couple of weeks could prove to be more interesting than they would have normally. There was some degree of something at least approaching finality where you did get a statement from President Trump today. That was probably because his Twitter account was still locked, where he says that he doesn't agree with the electoral college vote because of the rampant voter fraud that we all know is there. But I'm still not sure when they plan to introduce any of that evidence. I mean, sworn evidence, in court, subject to perjury evidence, because the clock is ticking. I think they might have missed their window. They might have wanted to use some of that evidence at any point in the last 2 months. But anyway, so even in that, he's just like, yeah, there'll be a peaceful transition of power, but I still won. So I think that's the best you're going to get from him. But as was said just moments ago, there's still a lot of people to pardon, and I'm not quite sure what happened. What's that? Including himself? Yeah, that I actually just got that from the New York Times. President Trump has suggested to aides in recent weeks he wants to pardon himself, but and this will be the last thing. The idea, don't you have to be pardoned for a specific crime or activity? It's not just a blanket pardon, right? If he pardons Don Jr. and if he pardons Don Jr. and Don Jr. No, let me put this a little differently. If he pardons Ted Cruz and then Ted Cruz continues his alleged string of murders as the Zodiac killer, can he then still be tried for those crimes that happened after the pardon? So if Trump hasn't been charged for anything, can he just give himself a pardon for his back pocket for a rainy day?
Well, we know that pardons are an admission of guilt.
Yeah, that's true.
If they accept the pardon. But I think that if Congress doesn't go back into session until after Inauguration Day, so there's nothing that Congress can pass over the next few weeks, or at least they're not, unless they go into impeachment proceedings, or if they call the House back and the Senate back into session. I'm just not entirely sure how the Supreme Court would rule if that made it up through the court systems, because I would think that that is a good constitutional question.
Yeah,
I'm just not entirely sure how this particular Supreme Court. I think the text, if the textualist originalists like Amy Coney Barrett might say that's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And then maybe she might join a John Roberts and the liberal wing, but I mean Clarence Thomas doesn't give a shit. Brett Kavanaugh doesn't give a shit. Who's the other guy? Who's Alito? Yeah, he doesn't give a shit either. Like those for that trio, that Alvin and the Chipmunks right there. They don't But we've seen Justice Roberts be like, absolutely not. But I think that Amy Coney Barrett might be that on this issue.
Yeah,
she be that contextualist, that textualist that says that's not what it was designed for. To your point, Christian.
Yeah, I would say the same thing in the sense that it hasn't been tested yet. But if you were to be a textualist and you were looking at it, that you would then say that a president cannot pardon themselves. You're not above the law. You can't do that. And that's what I said to you guys before, that if anything, I would think Trump would resign hours before inauguration in the hopes that Pence would then pardon him, just to make sure that it stood up to the Supreme Court in that sense. I think he would be too concerned that if he self-pardoned, that there is that risk that it would not stand up to the Supreme Court, even in this conservative majority, because exactly what Drexel says, if you were to look at it from an originalist, you would not be able to say that the president is above the law and can just self-pardon. That just makes no sense, that you could just be like, oh, I can do whatever I want and I can go out and shoot people on Fifth Avenue and I can just say, well, I'm pardoning myself. There is a limit, and not being able to do that. But though it has not been tested, it's not a sure bet, even as conservative, because of the originalist textualist of saying no person in America is above the law, and that includes the president. So I think that would be a really difficult test, and sure, I wouldn't put it past him to try it. But I think if he was going to be smart and really want to make sure he's covered, he would walk away in hopes that Pence, but like you said earlier, Christian, Pence may not want to do that anymore, because like Ford, that kind of tarnished Ford's image. Yeah. Even though Ford was trying to do it in the right noble way of saying, let's move on, let's, not deal with Nixon anymore, he's not president anymore, let's, come together as a country. He did it for the right reasons, but it still tarnished him in the 76 election, because people still look at it as you just let Nixon walk away. And so, for Pence to want to maybe run for president again in 24, he's going to look at that and think, do I want that as my legacy? to know we just let Trump walk away with potentially many serious crimes that are on the table that he can't be prosecuted for federally. So it's a very interesting thing, and we'll see what happens over the next week or so. But I don't think it would hold up to be able to self-pardon.
And it would set a bad precedence for
absolutely.
It was set about not just for the presidency, but for governors as well. Yeah, I mean, Brian Kemp could walk out the door and try to pardon himself for the crimes of probably that he has committed when he was Secretary of State that people are probably going to find out about. So
you're saying that Brian Kemp could pardon himself for stealing the 2020 election. Is that what you're saying?
That is.
So that's not what you're saying. Oh, I'm sorry. I read too much into that. My apologies.
Well, I can tell you that Governor Abrams, after the 22 election, will not be pardoning Brian Kemp, I'm sure.
And our friend who's had so much to say during the chat, Roz JD, mentioned the Insurrection Act. I don't think that applies because everything's calm right now, except for a few thousand racists in anti-Semite shirts and Viking horns. You know what I mean?
At the Trump Hotel in DC.
Yeah, they enjoyed themselves. He did ask a solid question. The real question is, what does the coronavirus think about all of this? And I saw a tweet about that. I follow she's a CNN contributor now, SE Cup, and she mentioned she got a text from somebody who works in the Capitol building who's like, yeah, but how much coronavirus is like all over this building now that we're supposed to go back to work in? And I guess we'll see in a couple weeks. I
was actually surprised that. I mean, I'm glad that they finished the work that they needed to get done last night, but I was actually surprised at the swiftness of which they went back in. Unless we know that things are being aerated in the Capitol fairly quickly and things wiped down and done all of that. Like, I wonder if they did any of all of that.
Yeah.
UV sweep.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I think if my kids' preschool have some kind of high tech like fogger that they use to clean it overnight, they probably just cleaned out, the one room for the joint session. Oh no, because they had to then go back. The Senate had to go back, so they had to clean 2 rooms. I guess it's not like anybody went back to their office, but yeah, I would hope they did something. Even if you go to Costco and they're dragging like the whole like row of shopping carts, they have like sort of the spray sanitizer. So maybe they had just a hose of sanitizer and they just sprayed it everywhere. But we're sort of making light of it, but it's a very real question. I did wonder about that, Scott. Were they going to go back last night because of those concerns? And I was glad to see that they did. Anyway,
what I heard is that they sprayed it down and they scrubbed everything down. So how they referred to it as they scrubbed it down. And I'm thinking beyond the damage that was done and the mess. I think it would also mean that they were spraying it down and trying to sanitize it as well. And as they said, they had to go in and show force of being like, we're not going to let these terrorists win, in the sense that they were constitutionally bound to do this on this date, even that over midnight, the January 7th, they needed to complete what was their constitutional duty. So I think that was to them a strong message. But you're right. I mean, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks if there's any issues with that.
Well, we'll also see what happens over the next couple of weeks because we'll be back next week and we will be doing the show on Inauguration Day as well. So keep tabs on us on social media and we'll make sure you get the link to our upcoming shows. But first, our guest, Drexel Hurd, who was kind enough to sit in with us. Where can people find you, Drexel?
Wait, it's right there. At Drexel Hurt. How do you do that? Oh, there it is.
It's not the way. It's not where you'd think you'd point. It's exactly. And Scott, if people want to see you communicating with soon-to-be Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, where do they do that?
S-Man 80.
And look at that. Tamra updated it before I even asked.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for putting your social media on there. And what platform is that for, Tamra?
TikTok.
She's
Find
all
me
about
on TikTok.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't look anywhere else. It's all about TikTok. And thanks to everyone who stuck with us throughout the chat for the whole show. And like I said, we always appreciate differing opinions as long as people are civil to each other. That's all we really look for. Thanks so much, everyone. We will see you next week.
Bye.